So we're Dumbners, and welcome to a video explaining indirect statements. Indirect statements are incredibly common in Latin, and you will absolutely see one on your GCSE, probably several. First thing we need to think about, though, is subclauses. Main and subclauses are something you probably did in primary school grammar. The main clause is the main part of the sentence. It functions by itself. Subclauses don't, they add information to the sentence. They are not the main sentence. So here on the left we have some direct sentences. These are all main clauses. So quarantine is boring. Everyone says that quarantine is boring. After the says is where our subclause is going to come in. The cheetah befriended a puppy. I hear that the cheetah befriended a puppy. I will revise very hard. The boy thinks that he will revise very hard. His teacher might not think so. So this part coming after the line is the subclause. It's the reported speech. The whole thing is an indirect statement. It's sort of reporting what someone said, but it's the bit coming after the line where the grammar is going to be different. You thought I was joking about the cheetah befriending a puppy, didn't you? Yeah, I'm not. Aren't they cute though? So, consider the sentence, the king says many words. Fairly sort of simple sentence. We can see that multa verba, going like bellum, is accusative plural. It's what's being said. The king says that the slave is running. Obviously, that looks pretty similar to the sentences we were just having with everyone thinks that quarantine is boring. So we can see it's going to be one of those indirect statements. The thing to notice here is this servum is accusative. In both instances, it's like the object of what's being said. So this is how an indirect statement works. You are reporting a statement, and bizarrely, things happen accusative. If we were to translate this more literally, we would have the sentence, the king says the slave to be running, like the slave is the object of what he is saying. So, if we want to break this down, we're normally going to have some form of introductory clause. This is actually the main bit of the sentence. The king says, full stop. Or the king is speaking, the king is talking. That's a perfectly decent sentence. And that's not the main sentence. Now we're going to get the rest of it, which is the subclause, where we're going to have an accusative, and then we're going to have an infinitive. So, in our main clause, we're going to have a verb of, well, speaking, thinking, feeling, knowing, etc. You can read. Some people call it verbs of the head, i.e. verbs to do with stuff in your brain or your senses. I'm not entirely sure about that, but it's one way to think about it. The nominative, so to speak, of the subclause, this person doing what's ever going on in the subclause, bizarrely enough goes accusative, and the verb of the subclause is infinitive. Also, please notice there's a that in there, because this is the that's what she said rule. Yes, that's a thing apparently. Indirect statements in English must include that. You will see people who do not know their grammar correctly skipping it out, but please try and use it in there because it will make it better. So, some example sentences. You're finding this a bit tricky to visualize. This would be a moment for you to pause, so you can come back after you've tried to work them out. 3, 2, 1. The old man says is our main sentence. That the messenger, notice we've got that, is carrying swords is how it's going to be translated. Literally, this is the old man says the messenger to carry swords. But we can see how you can improve the English there. For the second one, the young man hears, that's our main sentence, the soldiers to attack the city, or the soldiers are attacking the city. For the third one, notice I've underlined a couple of things here. Pueros are accusative, because they're going to be the object of our indirect statement, spoilers, and therefore the adjective describing them, stultos, must also be accusative. Makes sense, adjectives must agree with their noun. So here it's the girls think, main sentence, the boys are foolish, or literally the boys to be foolish. If that wasn't enough, there are some problems, some complications that we might need to think about when we're talking about indirect statements. One of them that is infinitives, despite what the name suggests, actually do have different forms. They might change their form depending on their tense or depending upon their voice, that's active or passive. So infinitives, by definition, always do have the to in there, to love, to be loved, to have loved, to be about to love, etc. But these are changing depending upon what they're doing in the sentence in terms of time and voice. A couple of things that we might want to note there. The perfect passive infinitive and the future active infinitive are basically just a participle with essay after it. This makes them a little bit easier. You don't have to learn anything new. All you're doing is using essay, which is the infinitive of some. So it literally means something like to be having been loved, which therefore translates as to have been loved. Makes some sense. When you are translating these, as you can see, portar wisse, we can see that's going to be perfect active infinitive, so it's to have carried the swords, which we're going to translate it just has carried the swords. And portaturum esse is going to be will carry the swords, literally the slave to be about to carry, but that's very clunky in English, so we're going to make sure we improve that. Please also note that technically there is a future passive, but it's very rare, does not appear at GCSE at all, and to be honest, Latin writers didn't seem to like it. They go out of their way to try to avoid it. So, some more examples. The leader is announcing that the walls are being attacked, so there's our present passive, by the enemy. The mistress thinks that the slave has hidden or hid the money, so it's perfect active. The woman is shouting that dinner has been prepared. This is our perfect passive. Notice that the endings are matching because paratam is describing kenam. And finally, the dog hopes that the master will soon return. Reventurum going with domin so they all need to be with the same ending if they have an ending. Effectively, these are participles. They can have adjective endings, so they must describe their noun. Look at the cute doggy. Another problem that we might need to think about. The king says that the soldier is carrying his sword. Whose sword? You really can't tell in English. It doesn't. It's not at all clear. It could be his own sword or it could be the king's sword, and we really just don't know. Latin, however, has two different words for the third person pronoun. So instead of using the is, id pronoun, he, she, it has a different pronoun, se, that is reflexive, i.e. only if you're talking about yourself. So here we can see the king says that he, se, is carrying a sword. So we know he is talking about himself because it's reflexive. Technically, literally, that sentence would say, the king says himself to carry a sword. Please don't write himself in that sentence. It sounds very clunky in English. Notice the second one down. The kings, plural, say that they are carrying a sword. Say is the same in the singular as in the plural, so be careful with that one. The king says that the woman, notice she's accusative because she is the object, she is the subject of the indirect statement, sent a gift to him, so that's dative. And there's also an adjective, suus a which is if you're talking about his, her, or its, or their own. So the king says that his sword is the biggest. We know he is talking about his own sword because they didn't use eios, which would mean his, as in someone over there. He is using suum, so it refers to his own sword, which is apparently the biggest. The next complication to think about is sequence of tenses. Here are two different versions of 3 sentences. Can you work out for yourselves, by looking at this, what might the rule be? Pause here. Sequence of tenses describes what needs to happen to the tense of the reported verb if the introductory verb, if the main sentence happens in the past. It is purely something that happens in English. For Latin, it doesn't change. So we're just talking about how the English translation will need to change. So we think about our original statements, circled over here. They would be in quotation marks if they were on our first slide. This old man will capture children, is capturing children, has captured children. So we can see the different tenses there. Now, if in an indirect statement that is being introduced by a verb in the present or future tense, nothing changes. The guard says that this old man will capture children. We can see that that's almost exactly the same. If, however, the introductory verb is in a past tense, or if we want to be more specific, what's called historic sequence, then actually, yes, the tense of the reported verb changes. So it goes from will here to would here. This is purely to make it sound better in English. So instead of the guard said that this old man will capture children, more correctly in English, that should be the guard said that this old man would capture children. The guard said that is goes to was, has goes to had. So if that's a lot, we can actually simplify that down. So if the introductory clause is past or historic sequence, you change the tense of the reported statement. So will goes to would, is goes to was, has goes to had. The example sentence down here, the slave is carrying swords becomes the slave was carrying swords. So finally, some examples of some fairly tricky ones. The slaves were hearing that the centre had been killed. So were hearing means that we have to change that has been killed to had been killed. Surely you understood that the legions were hurrying to war. Originally, literal sentence there is surely you understood the legions to be hurrying to war. But in proper English, we're going to have to translate it as were hurrying. The girls always used to believe, or used to always believe, that they, notice we got that say in there, would find husbands. So in when to harass is future, so that will goes to would. And the last one, the freedman said to his friends that his own, again that's suum, his own master had freed him. So this one we have suum and say in the same sentence. And we have to change the has freed him to had freed him because of this sequence of tenses. So, indirect statements as a summary. An indirect statement is a reported statement. It could be speech, but it might be feeling, thinking, hearing, etc. So, horses eat children, direct statement. The dog says that horses eat children, indirect statement. The main clause will be as normal, usually with a verb of speaking or whatever. The subject of the reported statement goes accusative, and then there will be an infinitive verb. So we can see here, the dog says that horses eat children. The infinitive, prior to what you have, unlike what you have seen previously, might have different tenses or voices. So the dog says that the horses ate children. It's obviously perfect tense. So now it's consum sisse, which is going to be an active perfect infinitive. Latin has different words to distinguish third-person pronouns. So you can work out whether the speaker is talking about themselves or another person. So the horse says that he, i.e. the horse, ate the children. We could use say. If we wanted to use the horse says that he, i.e. the dog, ate the children, we'd use eum, because that would be the accusative pronoun for when it's not talking about yourself. And finally, in English, we may need to change the tense of the reported verb if the introductory verb is in the past tense. Notice the Latin hasn't changed. You can see between these two, between this one here and this one here, the only difference is that dixit is now perfect tense. So Latin hasn't really changed, it's just a thing for English. So the horse said that he had eaten children. Has goes to had because the first verb is in a past tense. C, 4 children. So, indirect statements, a little bit complicated, but they absolutely will come up, and I hope this helps. Thank you very much.